On Earth at the time, the Boy Scouts were grappling with big changes. By the 1960s, many middle-class families were migrating from American cities to the suburbs. And urban communities were plagued with unemployment, crime, gang violence, and drug use. To help combat these problems, the Boy Scouts of America National Council launched the ambitious Inner City Rural Program. Professional scouters and volunteers explored new ways to bring scouting to underserved boys. Troops sprang up in storefronts and private homes instead of church basements and school gymnasiums. There were street cleaning campaigns designed to win the goodwill of local residents. In Philadelphia, 2 Cub Packs, 2 scout troops, and an explorer post were formed in housing projects. Traditional scouting activities were part of the appeal. Although outdoors might mean a city park or a strip of grass between the street and the sidewalk, these efforts paralleled the civil rights movement.
We will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together.
In 1968, the Boy Scouts of America refused to grant charters to troops that were segregated. The 1960s were turbulent. Young people were questioning authority. Opposition to the war in Vietnam was intensifying. Not as many boys were drawn to scouting, and in 1969, the Boy Scouts experienced its first dip in enrollment in many years. One small response was a change to the Scout promise. Cubs would promise to help other people, not to be square. Square had come to mean old-fashioned. More significantly, in 1972, the Boy Scouts introduced the Improved Scouting Program, an effort to make scouting more relevant. The changes were reflected in the 8th edition of the Scout Handbook. The word boy was de-emphasized. There was less attention to outdoor skills. The section on hiking was geared as much to city streets as to backwood trails. The Improved Scouting Program also brought a new focus on personal growth. No longer would Scouts need to master skills like cooking, camping, and swimming before they could begin to earn merit badges. And some merit badges previously required to become an Eagle Scout now became optional. There was controversy from the start, with many scouts and leaders worried that the Improved Scouting Program diluted traditional Scout activities. Other changes were more successful. Cub Scout programs were modified to reflect the fact that many Cubs never went on to become Boy Scouts. Cubs won new opportunities to go camping, often in the form of father-son weekends. Women were no longer limited to den mother status. From 1976 on, they could serve as Cub Masters. With regard to concern for the environment, the Boy Scouts might be seen as ahead of their times. In 1970, the Boy Scouts launched Project SOAR for Save Our American Resources. 2 years later, the Scouts introduced an Environmental Science Merit Badge, and it became a required merit badge for Eagle. In the 1970s, the Boy Scouts broadened their outreach to the disabled. Scout materials had long been available in Braille. Now there were special materials for the hearing impaired. In 1965, age requirements were relaxed for the mentally disabled. In 1978, age restrictions for rank advancement were also lifted for physically disabled Scouts. During these years, the Boy Scouts were working to heighten awareness of substance abuse. In 1959, the 6th edition of the handbook warned about marijuana. The 8th edition in 1972 had an expanded section on the dangers of glue sniffing and drugs like LSD. Exploring also underwent change. By the late 1970s, thanks to special interest in career-based programs, enrollment in Explorer posts was about 500,000 and growing 25% each year. Many explorers were young women. After some experimentation in the 1960s, exploring became fully co-ed in 1969. By the 1980s, women made up about a quarter of all explorers. The Boy Scouts also broadened its outdoor adventure programs, opening high-adventure bases along the Minnesota-Wisconsin border, in Maine, and in Florida. Yet overall, Membership in Scouting declined in the 1970s, with enrollment down as much as a third over previous decades. There were fewer adults, too. Problems in the economy left people with less time to volunteer. Some of the appeal would return, however, with a movement back to basics. For the Boy Scouts, the 1980s marked a return to traditional values. Advancement requirements once again included mandatory outdoor skills. Efforts continued to target hard-to-reach boys, in part by enlisting businesses and corporations to provide volunteer leaders for troops in the inner city. A program in Cleveland was especially successful. And in 1980, for the first time since 1972, the downward trend in enrollment was reversed. Tiger Cubs started in the 1980s. Now first graders were eligible to participate in Scouting. A T-shirt was the only uniform. Tigers promised to do their duty to God, family, and country, and to learn about the world. Changes were made to maintain the appeal to older youth, too. By 1982, Exploring had more than 600,000 participants, with half of all Explorer posts devoted to specific careers. Varsity Scouting was established for boys 14 to 17 who wanted still more challenging activities. And in the late 1990s, the Boy Scouts authorized venturing, dedicated to outdoor activities, sports, hobbies, and the arts. It would replace outdoor exploring and would serve boys and girls 14 to 20. The 1990s saw significant growth in Hispanic populations around the country, and the Boy Scouts rushed to develop special outreach programs and to translate Scouting materials into Spanish. Today, Asian Americans are a growing segment of the population, and the Boy Scouts is working to embrace these new Americans too, including boys and girls of Japanese, Chinese, and Vietnamese descent. The Boy Scouts of America enters its second century with powerful commitments to both conservation and change. Core values remain as important today as when the first Boy Scouts of America troops took shape in 1910. The mission remains to guide young people and help them develop the skills, confidence, and character to enter adulthood as strong individuals and citizens. But at the same time, the Boy Scouts has been confident enough to change with the times. The Boy Scouts strive to meet the needs of changing populations with different personal, economic, and social needs. In 2001, Boy Scouts across the country demonstrated their value to the nation with quick and generous responses to the terrorist attacks of September 11th. One scout was 18-year-old Richard Perlman, who lost his life helping rescue men and women as the second of the World Trade Center towers collapsed. Scouts raised money and supplies to help victims and rescue workers. Scouts also participated in vigils and displays of patriotism, lending moral support to each other and to the nation at large. And whether the help is great, assisting victims of natural disasters, or small, like a daily good deed, Boy Scouts stand ready to serve. The second century of Scouting has begun, and the Boy Scouts of America draw on the challenges of the past to forge their way into a prosperous future. True to their motto, the Scouts will always be prepared for what tomorrow brings. New challenges, new adventures, new friends, and as always, a lot of fun along the way.